I want to thank you guys for bringing up my video. I'm sorry about how horrible my video is going to sound. And I'm sorry about having no video on my part. My video is more horrible than my audio. If you believe me, it's really choppy. So it kind of looks like I'm getting 10 pictures every 2 seconds. So it looks pretty bad. So I can't use my video. Um, I hope Garret, Tim, I'm sorry, Tim, I can't say your name, Demo, I'm not even going to try. Shoe on Head and Armored Skeptic, I hope you all listen to this, and I would like to know what you think about it. If you want to talk to me or anything, please contact me through either YouTube or I have a Facebook email or Facebook name, Jim Killam. I am in Harvard, Illinois, and my picture is actually a Millennium Falcon. So you'll know, and I think it could be Bad Boys on my top of my screen. It was Batman, but anyway, just so you know, nice talking to you, and thanks. And if you're watching this, thank you.
But we can talk about campus rape in particular because that's what me and Shu mostly talked about.
In college or on college campuses, there's a sex culture that considers itself experimental and open. By definition, experiments can go bad, and sometimes both the male and female can be responsible for the bad outcome of an experiment, even sexually. By giving the male all the responsibility and taking all the responsibility away from the female, you endanger the female more. You also destroy the equality or supposedly what feminism wants to fight for. But if both are equal, then why does he take all the responsibility? Well, without her actions, he would stand no chance of doing what he's doing. When is a man considered too drunk to be considered responsible for what he does? These questions are never looked into. Brock Turner is actually a good example of what I would not consider a rape. Why? Because a victim holds some responsibility and blame. What would I believe this? To save a woman from a more horrible possible events in her family and to realize how destructive her actions could eventually be. A family I once knew had a daughter. It was a Christian family. And she was doing all the kind of wrong things, like going off with strangers, sexual contact with various guys, waking up in bed with guys she barely knew. One day she went to a party out in the middle of nowhere with a guy she just met. The party was going okay until the only girl and left at the party. The guys in the room right next to her started arguing about 10 grand. They all talked about the ability to screw her or after they paid for her. They all looked at her with sexual hunger eyes. She finally realized the man was selling her to the man at the house. They grabbed her butt, pushed her around, and groped all over her body as she started to cry and fight back. She ran outside with her keys accessible, only to realize the screaming would not help, because she was in such a rural place that there was no one around to hear her scream. And the cars where the remaining men were parked all the way around her car. She could not even open the doors of her car, or if she got even in her car, there's cars in front of her and behind her, so she was totally blocked in. She slowed down enough when she realized this and got tackled by the men who were chasing her. The men laughed and talked about screwing her now and later, and as they tied her up. She sobbed like she'd never sobbed before. She was begging for the gag to just let her bring her home. Between the pleas, they would slap and talk about raping her and silencing her from her crying. They finally gathered her up in one of their cars to take her to the other house to finally gang rape her. The driver there was so quiet, and so was she. They took her out of the car, joking about the fun they were going to have with her inside. They brought her inside and laid her on the couch. She was so emotionally drained she couldn't even cry anymore. They took off her blindfold and she saw her parents standing there with a group of guys. They were sons of her father's good friends, and she'd never met them before. They started to come at her parents. She started to come at her parents with anger, till her mom told her something that stopped her in her tracks. Who is to blame if these men were really going to take you away to another country and control you and rape you? Who would you blame as you were being raped stranger by stranger, as you were being sold as a prostitute? The men who cared so little about you, they sold you for 10 grand? How about the Johns? Would they care enough? When would you finally blame yourself so you can take some responsibility for your own body? It is not the man's fault that you were too drunk to stop him from having sex with you. Now when you have AIDS, you did this to yourself. The person who should care about you the most should be the most responsible and therefore carry the most blame. And who should that be? The daughter, tired, looks up and says, "Me. I'm responsible for myself." The daughter went on to talk about this. Is actually at church. She talked about this. The daughter went on and talked about how finally she came to realize that feminism power that was with her once she owned part of the pain she caused herself. Only by taking responsibility and blame can women finally be honest about their past sexual experiments, assaults, and rapes around them. There are many parts of law where we blame the victim. So in blaming the victim, it gives the victim power to actually do the right things, and it shows the victim what the right things are to do. Car theft is an example. If a person leaves the keys in the car and the car unlocked, the insurance company does not have to pay the claim because the victim of the car is just as responsible as a thief because the victim of the car was so irresponsible. And I think if you would talk about the things you so-called rapes, you could actually put a lot of responsibility on the women and blame on the women, just like you do with a car. So I think that also puts them in a more powerful position because they're taking self-ownership of their own bodies that way.
Women should protect themselves. It's one of my biggest stances on this. How to, of course, protect yourselves from things like that. So saying that, it's the fault of the victim, I feel like is always a no. It's like,
yeah, and I guess that's a great example of this whole thing, because the people who are saying it's her fault because she was wearing a miniskirt or whatever, effectively saying that, they're not trying to promote rape. They're not trying to make rape happen more or anything like that. They're trying to push a conservative agenda. And so they're doing it unintentionally.
I rarely ever see people saying that. The only time I hear that being a thing is when feminists are like, that's an example of rape culture. I'm like, yeah, that's pretty shitty. Okay.
I'm sorry, She, you're wrong. People who should take responsibility for their behavior, when they do not deserve blame. Why should a woman go to those defense classes or any kind of classes for consent if she is not taking responsibility for her and does not deserve any blame ever? If you are right, and a woman who is raped does not deserve no responsibility or blame, then by definition, they should never have to take any classes or take any defensive measures. It's all the man's fault. It's all his blame. It's all his responsibility. Blame and responsibility are inseparable by law and by truth. If you listen to my argument to Garret before this, you'll understand my argument in greater depth. I went into a story that kind of describes my argument. And no, Garret, you are wrong. The concept of a short skirt or how they're addressed was our attempt at trying to stop rapes from happening in a conservative way. It is just not pushing an agenda for pushing an agenda's sake. And telling that does not give the rapist some pass, but it does give the woman who wants to stop the rape more power because she feels more responsible for herself and she can take the blame on herself and be honest about it. No, it is not shitty to tell a woman that she can be partly responsible for her negative sexual relations if the reason is true, because she can take then responsibility and do not do responsible behavior that results in her own pain. I can stop all knocked out drunk sex in college right now. Women take responsibility for their own sexual organs and not get so drunk that you pass out. 100% effective.
Its finding was that 73% of female college student rape victims did not know that what happened to them met the legal definition of rape. And that was the legal definition of rape in the late 80s.
Then maybe the legal definition of rape was wrong. And we should, as a society, have another honest talk about what constitutes a rape now in this generation, instead of having men go with a Victorian idea of rape and have them do Victorian style rape when women were considered to want to stay virgins and not want to be sexually active. And have women have the 2016 version of what rape is, so what sexual liberation is. So we need to keep it constitute honesty and therefore truth on both sides.
Only mandatory consent courses. And there's a huge aversion to teaching women how to, like, not necessarily how to not get raped, but how to recognize the signs that you might be in a situation where this kind of thing might happen.
Because, Armor Skeptic, the feminists are right. Once you admit that women can be responsible, by definition, if they are responsible, they can be blamed, even for getting sexually abused. Just like a guy keeping his keys in a running car and it getting stolen. The blame comes with responsibility, and responsibility comes with the honesty of saying, yes, you could have changed it, so you are partly responsible. Sorry, that's just logic in the end.
Exactly what you guys do. That you're obsessing over the term feminist rather than the issues we're talking about, like people like me. That's what happens to me. People go, "Oh, you're a feminist," and then assume a bunch of stuff about my views rather than engaging on what I personally might believe.
Yeah, Garret,
things that I care about. You know?
That's what we're saying, though, is that's part of your PR problem right now. I'm not
But,
saying.
I mean, I could say the same thing about anti-feminism, but that's the thing is I don't, because I don't go after people like I don't say Black Pigeon Speaks said this crazy thing, so you must believe that. I look at each person on a case-by-case basis.
Well, no.
You could not say that about anti-feminists because we come from multiple different ideologies. You come from a single ideology, or at least a single idea of wanting to get to a certain location or a certain ideal. Like me, a conservative Christian probably has very little in common with Shuan Head or Armor Skeptic. Compared to the goals of feminists, we have completely different goals. They even admit it when they sit there and they say no about conservative people who talk about what they want with the country. So if there's so many different end results or desires on our side, you can't say we're all going in the same direction. We're just anti-you. Just because we're not the small piece of the pizza doesn't mean the rest of the pizza is all exactly the same. It's just you are that slice of pizza. So we can quantify you, or we're unquantifiable because we come from all different ideologies and ideas. I want to thank you guys for listening to this, anyone who's listening, but especially Tim, Shuan Head, Armor Skeptic, and Garret. I want to have an open and honest dialogue with this. It's very interesting that you guys are talking about this kind of stuff. And I think conservatism has gotten a bad viewpoint or a bad argument because most conservatives really can't argue their positions properly. They don't start from a logic tree root, so their tree looks very dead and destroyed. And that's kind of why I start from the root and the logic of the root and of truth. And that way, at least the truth that I believe in. And that way it makes sense to me. And I hope it makes sense to you. And I hope you go on to the next video if there's one after this. Or this is the last video. You've enjoyed listening to it. Hope you watch them all. Anyway, thank you very much. And see ya. Either, contact me on YouTube if you're either Garret, Tim, Shuan Head, or Armor Skeptic, or you can do my Facebook, which has a Millennium Falcon on it, and a Bad Boys letter, I think, or it could be Batman. I don't remember which one I have. Thanks anyway. Hope to maybe argue with you in this future sometime. Bye.